Welcome, my friends. Today we're talking about traditional bathing practices in Africa. With all the heat this summer, it got me thinking about baths. So we're going to try to document everything ever related to washing oneself in Africa. And yes, I do indeed intend to list everything I can, just like we did in our traditional African kitchen episode. So let's get this show started. What you're looking at right now is a 3D reconstruction of ruins on Sango-Marna Island, which is part of Tanzania. According to Boston University, these buildings has within it a bathing pool. If you look closely, you'll see an octagonal-shaped pit. That is the bathing pool, and it's specifically a Persian-style bath because Tanzania is part of the Swahili coast, which is a blend of African and Middle Eastern cultures. We can see a photo of the ruins here. Much of the building is long gone, but the octagonal shape of the pool is still clearly visible. After seeing that pool, some of you may be wondering if the bathing pool in the film The Woman King is historically accurate. Well, maybe. What I'm about to say should be taken with a grain of salt. According to a conversation between the film director and set director, supposedly that pool is based in reality. The following is a quote from the director Gina Prince Bythewood. This was one of my favorite sets. This was one of the first designs that Ken came to me with, and it was based on research. That's the beauty of it. He discovered that there were pools, natural pools. We were wondering how baths worked back then, because there were no images of them. And then to start connecting the dots of little things that you read and pick up and understand that, of course, if it's underground, there can be some elements like the column right there, which are built, but it was so much of the natural environment. And he actually found pictures that were taken in the modern day when these underground areas were discovered. That was just a game changer because then they could start to piece it together, determine what it would look like. The natural walls would feel so great in the natural light and the candlelight that they used." End quote. Now, as some of you know, in a previous video of mine, I showed that for the most part, the set direction in that movie did a good job of displaying Dahomey cultural objects and architecture. So part of me wants to accept this information about the Dahomey pool as fact. However, I have not been able to find the research that the director is alluding to, and I prefer not to just take some Hollywood director at her word. So for now, I'll just say that the Dahomey pool might be real. Anyway, how about single-person bathtubs? Can we find any of those in Africa? Well, some months ago, the internet rabbit hole brought this image to my attention. In fact, there was two images I found of this old bathtub, because if you look closely in the background of this image behind the woman is the same tub. Apparently, this tub is part of a fort built by the Kanem-Bornu Empire in northeast Nigeria. Unfortunately, despite the fort being a national monument, due to high costs of maintenance, the place is falling into ruin. Of course, not every African had access to pools or bathtubs, so let's now look at a more rural way of bathing in Africa. There's a video I found made by a channel named Village and Beyond, in which a village woman from rural Uganda shows a traditional way of washing. Here we see a bathing stall made of banana tree leaves and palm branches, which also includes a curtain for privacy. The water for her bath is, as you can see, in a bucket. In the olden days, this would have been a clay pot, but in our modern times, plastics are everywhere, including in a village like this, so she's using a bucket instead. Besides the water, she's also using a washcloth and a bar of soap to clean herself. And to dry, she does not use a towel, but instead wraps herself in silk. Now, the soap that she's using might be a modern bar of soap. It's honestly hard to tell from this video, but it's worth noting that many Africans do in fact have traditional soaps. These traditional soaps can range from simple water and special plant mixtures to more complex bars of soap. And part of the reason I suspect she might be using a modern soap is because the traditional African soaps that I've seen usually range in color from brown to black. I should also note that there are plenty of Africans that don't go to fetch water for their baths, but rather use the natural bodies of water themselves for the bath. In regions where water is scarce, alternative ways of cleaning oneself exist. For example, the Himba people use both smoke and a clay called ojitse to keep themselves clean. Despite not using water, the science shows that the Himba's methods of hygiene maintenance protects them from bacteria and even keeps them protected from the sun's ultraviolet light. So does that mean the Himba were the first people to invent sunscreen? Maybe. But if it wasn't them, then that honor would go to the Egyptians, who, according to the National Library of Medicine, invented sunscreen all the way back in 3100 BC. Either way, whether it was the Egyptians or the Himba who did it first, it's kind of funny that Africans invented sunscreen before the Europeans did. That said, if you're curious, the Greeks eventually devised a type of sunscreen of their own around 800 BC. The Egyptians' concoction is derived from rice, jasmine, and lupine, whereas the Greeks used olive oil. And apparently even Japan created a formula in 700 AD. Unlike the Africans and Europeans, who used pleasant and safe ingredients, the Japanese straight up smeared lead and mercury on their faces. Holy shinobi. Do not try that at home, folks. Anyway, getting back to Africa, I have another peculiar bathing item to show you, and that is the sweat scraper. What's a sweat scraper, you ask? Well, just as the name implies, it's an implement used to scrape off sweat. The examples I've seen come from southern Africa, and they can be used for other purposes as well, but for this video we are only concerning ourselves with the tool's hygienic use. It's also worth noting that the Greco-Roman world made use of sweat scrapers as well. I'm sure if Japan had sweat scrapers, they'd probably make it out of plutonium and pufferfish poison. I'm joking, of course. Obviously Japan would make theirs from the claws of a dead Venusaur and the power of friendship. Hopefully I'm not picking on the Japanese too much. If it makes some viewers feel better, I'll note that the Romans were constantly poisoning themselves with lead. Romans used lead in their pipes, dishes, cosmetics, coins, and more. And apparently it's been documented that about 39% of South African traditional medicine men have been known to use mercury as a medicine. So there you go. Now that I've figuratively kicked the whole world in the balls, no one can complain that I'm being mean to a particular group. Alright, let's get back on track. Surprisingly, I haven't addressed just simply washing hands yet, so let's get into that now. Among the Zulu, washing one's hands would be done traditionally by using water stored in a clay basin, or in other words, a pot of water. That said, pottery was not the only way Africans stored water. Some African peoples also built cisterns, which are essentially a large tank that could hold a vast amount of water. For some Africans in the Islamic parts of Africa, both washing hands and feet take on a ceremonial context because they must wash these parts of themselves before entering a mosque. This ritual is known as ablution. Now you may be wondering, how did Africans get the water they needed? After all, not only do we need water for bathing, but also drinking, growing crops, and etc. So I decided to put a list together for these methods, and only after making it part of the script for this video did I realize these devices could have been their own category in separate video. Damn, that's probably what I should have done. Oh well, it's part of this video, so let's get into it. There were multiple ways that Africans procured water, which range in complexity. The simplest, of course, involves visiting a fresh water source and filling your vessel. For our first water device, we'll look at the Moroccan Katara, also known as Quina, which is an ancient underground water channel designed to transport water down slopes without activating pumping. Quina consists of gently inclined horizontal tunnels in sloping terrain. The horizontal tunnel allows water to flow downhill and the channel toward outlets at the base of the slope. Next, let's go to Egypt to find the shaduf, which is a long pole balanced on a beam. The front end of this pole had a vessel attached which was dipped into the water and then would be pulled up with the heavy weight on the back end of the pole. And that's not the only water device Egypt had. There's also the Noria, which is a water wheel whose water collection ability comes from the movement of the water itself. Let's now move south to Nubia and view another type of water wheel called a sakya. It works a bit differently than the Noria, as you can see. Its water carrying jars are attached to a belt that's activated by the wheel. Additionally, the wheel itself is not moved by flowing water, but instead it is set in motion by either a farm animal or the farmer themselves. Unlike the Noria, this device can take liquid from standing water such as a lake, a pond, or a well. Of course, the well itself is also a form of water-related technology, though I doubt I need to explain that one to you. Lastly on our list of everything are canals, aqueducts, and impluviums. These were all discussed in a video by Jabari on the From Nothing channel, so rather than explaining them myself, I'll direct you to watch his video called How Africans Conquered Water. Furthermore, Jabari has another old video called How Did Ancient Africans Bathe, which you may also want to watch, because even though the point of my video is to list everything ever in the sphere of African bathing, and therefore needed to include the things Jabari talked about in his video, it's still worth watching that bathing video of his because even though it covers fewer things than this video, it goes more in depth about certain things like the African black soap, which I only briefly mentioned. In fact, if I remember correctly, Jabari was the one who taught me about that soap to begin with, so be sure to watch that video as well. Finally, I also think you should check out the video by the Ugandan YouTube channel Village and Beyond because that obviously helped in the making of this video as well. All three of these videos will be linked in a pinned comment. Thank you for watching. As you can imagine, these everything ever videos take a lot of work, and to be frank, I was originally going to talk about hygiene and personal care items in general, but I decided to make it more narrow of a topic due to the amount of time this video took me to make. Like, I've literally been working on it for more than a month. Anyway, if you think I missed something in any of my everything ever videos, you can let me know in the comments, and at some point in the future I'll probably make a video for things I've missed. Alrighty, that's all, folks.
Spoodly doots.